Hello and welcome to the Westerville City Schools podcast, We Are the Ville. This podcast will take you behind the scenes of Westerville City Schools and show you the ins and outs of how our school operates and the great kids we have. I'm your host, Melanie Amato. In our last episode, we talked about the win-win agreement with the City of Columbus. The win-win agreement ended in 2016. It is no longer in effect today. Remember, our Westerville City school boundaries didn't change at all. We still went north into Genoa Township and south to 161 in Columbus. And all the people who live within this Westerville City school boundaries pay the same Westerville City school taxes. They always have, and they will always be our kids. But what was the impact of win-win? And what impact did it have on our schools? Please welcome back Chief Personnel and Policy Officer Scott Reeves. Hello, Scott.
Hey, Melanie. Really looking forward to doing this again and wrapping up this fantastic and fascinating story.
Yes. So the win-win agreement is now over. Mm-hmm. Our school boundaries are safe. Tell us, how does that play into part of what we are as Westerville City Schools today?
Being protective of our boundaries and making them safe, especially our Blendon Township part of our boundaries, which are on the east side of the reservoir and where Huber and Wilder is. It really protects them, because if they had ever been annexed by the City of Columbus, they would have left our school district, and now they're safe to build subdivisions. We also realize that because of the remnants and the rules of win-win, we over the decades were very hesitant, if not refusing, to build schools in an area that we could potentially lose, like we did with Minerva Park Elementary School and the Beechcroft neighborhood that was Westerville. And so it made it safe to actually build schools closer to home. And we have since built 2 schools in the southern part in the village of Minerva Park. We've built Minerva France, and we built Minerva Park Middle School. And intentionally, we wanted to build schools where the majority of our population is. We talked last time that about 4,600 kids live in Westerville, go to Westerville schools. Almost 5,600 kids live in Columbus. That's not including Minerva Park. You include Minerva Park, you're talking about 6,000 kids.
That's a school district in itself.
South of Schrock Road. But again, as you alluded to, we've had all of Blendon Township since it was created in the 1800s.
So what do you hope people get out of this series that we've done?
Well, I hope they're enlightened, one, to understand why we have so many different jurisdictions, why we have not only Blendon or Columbus or Minerva, but why we also have Genoa Township. Why isn't Genoa Township in Olentangy? Why isn't Genoa Township in Big Walnut? Why is it in Westerville? Well, that part came to us in the 1920s. Why do we have Sharon Woods? As soon as you cross Cleveland Avenue, you're in Sharon Township. If you're at the community center, the soccer fields are in Sharon Township. The community center is in Blendon Township. Across the street to the north is Genoa Township. Cat a corner to that on the northwest side is Orange Township. All 4 townships converge at County Line in Cleveland. And so why do we have all of these different jurisdictions? I hope they have a better understanding of why that is, and really why we've made the decisions with which we made, and that kids coming from Morrison, Cleveland, kids coming from behind the area on the north side of Easton, I mean, they've been coming to us when they were coming in wagons and horses.
Yeah. So what's our demographic of, Westerville City Schools today, and how did all of this history play a factor into it?
Well, for one, it made Columbus, the win-win agreement and the protection of suburban lands allowed the city of Columbus to continue to grow. In fact, the city of Columbus is larger outside of the Columbus Public Schools footprint than inside. And the win-win and the protection of the suburban boundaries allowed the city of Columbus healthily to grow. That fueled the population and exploded. We talked about all the high schools that were built in Dublin and Hilliard and Worthington and Westerville and Pickerington because of that expansion and that economic health that we enjoy today. Well, when I was a kid, and I'm a 1987 high school graduate, when I was a kid and I went to Ohio State, the donut around downtown was mostly impoverished, mostly citizens of color. We had very little immigration. We didn't have much of an international flavor 20, 30 years ago in the city of Columbus. This is a first generation impact that I personally think makes our city richer. But you had, and those areas were vacated by families when the freeways were built who had cars and could go out into the budding suburbs. Poor families, black immigrant families filled in that donut. Mount Vernon Avenue, the Short North, Italian Village, all of those areas. Well, they have all been redeveloped. And you've had significant gentrification, redevelopment of those areas where you've got $1 million home after $1 million home in German Village. You now have $1 million homes in Italian Village. You see the explosion of growth in the Short North. That basically from Clintonville to German Village is seamless through campus of incredible growth. You see mid-rise apartments being built. Well, those in poverty had to go somewhere. They no longer could afford to live in the donuts surrounding downtown, the growth of Children's Hospital and all of those things around downtown. And it pushed poverty to the fringes of town out around 270. And Columbus continued to get more diverse. We have been because of our economic prosperity, it's been a landing place for immigrants coming to the United States, like so many of our ancestors did, for a hopeful, better life. And a lot of those immigrants came from Africa, the Middle East, South America, our Somali population, second largest in the nation, Bhutanese, Nepali population, Indian, Middle Eastern population. And it made the area around 270, which was the fringe, high end, now have greater poverty than it ever had. More families of color, not only families of color, but different religions, different cultures, different languages. And so you take a suburb like Westerville, which at the time of Win-Win was mostly white families. Maybe we were 5 to 10% families of color.
Yep.
Some suburbs even less, Reynoldsburg even less, Hilliard even less, Dublin even less. But pushing families away from the core of town out to 270 has made Westerville the latest school where children of color are now the majority of our school district, joining Reynoldsburg, joining Groveport, joining Whitehall. But we've also seen, in addition to our wonderful diversity that we see our children growing up together, experiencing children from all over the world, languages and cultures from all over the world, which I believe give our children a unique advantage as adults. You're also seeing an increase in poverty. And we have a percentage of poverty hovering around 40%, which is higher than we've ever seen. And that is something that the city of Columbus is working to address in partnership with school districts. And so it's just the evolution of a city, and every major city has seen a very comparable. DC has seen it, whereas it used to be homeless on the doorsteps of the White House, and now almost all of DC is uninhabitable if you're not middle class to wealthy.
Yeah.
So we've all seen it and experienced it, but that's the impact, that the lasting legacy of prosperity and growth that Win-Win had, and then the prosperity and growth in the city of Columbus that has pushed poverty and settlement to the fringes of the town.
Yeah. And so, Scott, why did you also think telling the history of our school district was so important?
Well, I think it's important because we hear the misinformation all the time. We hear what people understand about, what they think they understand about Win-Win, and it is a gross misconception of the development and the history of our school district, why we educate, who we educate, and we thought it was important for people to understand when they ask the question, why do we educate students what seems as far away as Morse Road? Why do we educate students as far away from Westerville as Big Walnut? Why do we educate out to Amherst and 270? Why do we educate on the other side of the reservoir? And I think it was very important for people to understand the foundation of why, the history of why, the growth of why, the pain and successes of why, to understand that, wow, Westerville City Schools, we're actually smaller than we used to be. That our school district was actually bigger than it is today. And they've always been our kids, and that's why we titled it that.
Yeah, and I guess, you beat me to it because, that was the first question I asked back in the first episode. It was, why do people think we still bus in kids from Columbus? But the answer is they've always been our kids.
Yeah, they've always been our kids.
Thank you, Scott. This was amazing. And I really appreciate you joining us throughout this series. And I hope our listeners learned a little bit more about the history of Westerville City School District and now can see and help educate others. Remember, in our district of over 14,500 students, only 1/3 of our students live inside the Westerville city limits. The rest come from Genoa Township, Blendon Township, Sharon Township, the Village of Minerva Park, and the City of Columbus. They have always been our kids. Scott, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Melanie.